anyway, we're going to pick back up. I'm going to first give you an overview of the judgments of Revelation, because that'll help with the next part we're going to go into, which is actually a new part for me. They came from a person that watched us online, then sent me a comment and said, have you thought about this? And I thought it was very interesting, so I included it in today's lesson. So here's how the judgments are going to go when we get into them there in chapter 5 of Revelation. There's going to be the 7 seal judgment. Those are the seals on the scroll. As they peel each seal off the scroll to open it, it brings actually 6 judgments. The 7th one, when they open it, brings in 7 trumpet judgments. There's 7 trumpet judgments, and the 7th of those brings in the 6 seal judgments. So there's 6 bowl judgments. So there's 7 seal judgments, then 7 trumpet judgments come out of that, and then 7 bowl judgments come out of that. And the reason that's important is because of what we're going to look at in some of those judgments. Yes, ma'am? What are they? It's when these angels blow trumpets, and then a judgment occurs on the earth, like a third of the water turning to blood, a third of the green trees being burned up.
This is the end of times.
This is during Revelation, during the Tribulation, the 7 years, that brings us to the second coming of Christ.
What about the seal? What is that?
The seal judgments, the 7 seal judgments, we've got the scroll we talked about 2 weeks ago. That scroll has all the judgments in it, and it's the title to the earth, because Jesus has taken back the earth from Satan. He's taking back his ownership. That's the whole point. And so then as they peel the seals off, each one has a judgment in it. Like the first 4 seals are what are known as the 4 horses of the apocalypse. Right. The white horse with the conqueror, the red horse, which is war, the black horse, which is death and famine, and the pale horse, actually the famine and pale horse, which is death, I believe, as it goes. And then there's more. And then, like I said, the 7th seal judgment, when they peel it off, it brings in 7 trumpet judgments. The angels blow their trumpets, and a judgment occurs. Blow a trumpet, and a judgment occurs. The 7th one of those brings in the 7 bowl judgments, which are the final judgments, where an angel literally pours a bowl out on the earth and causes all kinds of problems.
Now, these judgments, these seals, I'm sorry, but are they going to happen like simultaneously, or is it like 1 month there and 6 months? The question is if they happen simultaneously. No, the way they're laid out in the Bible, they happen one right after the other. But I mean, it's going to happen like within a month or a week or
something like that, because all of this occurs in 7 years. So they have to occur pretty quickly. So they're one kind of on top of the other. Not necessarily immediately after, but very close. Because some of them take some time as well.
Right.
But what basically the end of result is of those judgments, you'll notice when we get down to the end of that, you'll see that 2 things are happening. Number 1, life on earth is absolutely miserable beyond belief. Number 2, part of what God is doing is he's shaping the earth back into the shape it had prior to the flood. You're going to find out that things like all the mountains fall down. There's no more mountains. The only mountain left on earth is Jerusalem. That's it. Things like that. There's massive earthquakes. Every city collapses. So on and so forth. It's a time that's unbelievable. And we'll talk more when we get there. But one of the things that I've heard very few teachers talk about, all of that God does, yes, that's awful. But imagine living on an earth with no Holy Spirit to restrain evil, where Satan is let loose to do whatever he wants, however he wants. And imagine man's inhumanity to man. It's bad now, and we have controls on it, laws, so on and so forth. Imagine what it's going to be like during tribulation, where a lot of that breaks down. Here's one thing, ladies, I hate to say this, but one thing I would not want to be during that period is a woman. Because guess what's going to happen to women? All those rights, all those, gone. Because men will be released to do whatever they want. We already see it happening with what's happening right now. We're believing things that are completely crazy and untrue, and we want to get rid of the cops, and the bad guys are the good guys, and we're not going to have to post any bond anymore, and you can steal without getting arrested. You can see it already happening. It's already taking all of that apart, piece by piece by piece. And nobody ever talks about what man does to man during this time, which is probably worse than what God does. And so it's going to be an unbelievably terrible, terrible time on earth. Okay, what this person brought up, though, was they brought up this crazy drive to replace all of our power generation with solar and wind. And anybody that knows anything about electricity knows that there is absolutely no way with current technology we can even come close to replacing our electricity. With all that's happened, the last time I looked, we produced less than 19% of our electricity from solar, wind, and from hydro plants. And the hydro plants probably produce the bulk of that. You know. And so, and the problem is, number one, the very best solar cells that they make are 20% efficient. They convert 20% of the sunlight that hits them into electricity. Trust me, in any other aspect of the industrial world, that would not even be considered a product. If they gave you a car and said, well, this car will get like 20% of the mileage that it, ought to get, and we go, I don't want that. No. But yet with solar, we do. And the hotter it gets, the lower their efficiency, because they're electronics. And where are most of the solar plants?
In the desert.
In the desert, where it gets super hot. Absolutely. So their efficiency of the best at 20% probably drops to more like 15%. So again, then we've got wind power. Well, that's great if the wind blows. And there's lots of times when the wind doesn't blow. And our battery technology, I don't care what people try to say, it's not remotely close. Come on, we can't even get a car to go 300 miles. They say they do. I have an electric car. They lie. If you've got a tailwind, the air conditioner off, no power in anything except the motor, you might get 300 miles on a totally flat road. But driving in normal, the best we get is about 250, maybe 260, something like that. And so then we're going to scale those batteries up to the industrial level to contain megawatts and gigawatts. That's billions of watts and trillions of watts. That kind of thing. No, can't happen.
So why don't we just go back to gas?
And most of the manufacturers are refusing to build electric cars now because they're not cost effective. Nobody will buy them. They're almost having to give them away to get rid of them because people don't want them anymore. The reason we can't go, the question is, why don't we go back to gas and oil? Because of all the environmental people who have made it a huge political issue and all of the leadership that is bowed to it. And that's all connected to the nonsense of global warming. That's where it all started. Is the globe warming? Absolutely. Does man have anything to do with it? Nope, absolutely not. None, zero. There are many, 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 many instances in history where the earth warmed dramatically and cooled dramatically long before the Industrial Revolution. That's what I find so amazing. It's obvious, as I've told you guys so many times. And I just saw another video this week where I think it was an Egyptian coastal town is under 60 feet of water. What happened? The ice melted. That's what happened. And enough ice melted that it raised the level of the oceans by 60 to 80 feet. This is what Al Gore and everybody was talking about was inches, maybe a foot. That was 60 to 80 feet in history when there was no Industrial Revolution. And you have to say, well, where did that happen? What caused it? It's just the natural cycle of the sun. That's all it is. And so on. So, anyway. So this idea of solar wind power, why is that important? Well, I've always wondered about why there is such a religious fervor. It has nothing to do with logic, reality, workability. We just said, none of the stuff's efficient. None of it can work when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. And I don't know about you, but I like my electricity all day, every day. Not like Africa and the Middle East and other areas where you get it a few hours a day, maybe if you're lucky. That kind of thing. And it's because of these judgments, that's why. Because you're going to find out, we're going to look at a couple of passages where during the tribulation, God's going to dramatically reduce the output of the sun, and there's going to be times when the sun goes totally dark. Well, what's going to happen if the world has pushed itself to 50% of its energy coming from solar? No electricity. And there's nothing you can do about it. Even if you had batteries, they'll last a little bit, then they're gone, it's dark. You're also going to find there's a passage we're going to look at that says God puts angels at the 4 points of the compass and they stop the wind. There's no wind. I always found that interesting. Why no wind? Well, if you think about the earth being pushed to using wind power, and there's getting to be more wind power than solar power because of the efficiency and the cost, no wind. What happens to all the solar generation? So now you have an earth that has like maybe 1/3 of the electricity it had prior to the start of the tribulation. And imagine what kind of havoc that's going to wreak. What would happen in your life today if we cut your electricity by 2/3? You get it 1/3 of the day. Or you can only draw a certain amount of current that's 1/3 of what you used to draw, meaning you can only run a handful of things, like not air conditioners, things like that, so on and so forth. I didn't pull out the verse, but you'll also find out that when you get down to the bowl judgments at the end, one of the bowl judgments makes the sun get so hot that it literally burns people if they walk outside. And I just told you, though, that a huge amount of the electricity is not going to be there to run air conditioners with, so guess what that's going to be like? I mean, it's so bad that if you go outside, it'll burn you and kill you, unless you're a Christian. You can walk right out the door, and it doesn't do a thing.
How do you know that?
It says so.
Oh, I like it.
It says so.
I mean, it's cool.
It's because, see, when you get to the bowl judgments, God gets much more to showing that there's a true separation between his people and the people of the earth. In the beginning, the judgments affect everybody.
Right.
But when you get down towards the really nasty ones at the end, they don't affect the Christians. Even when the earth is dark where they are, it's light. Which is interesting. Which also happened in Egypt, by the way. I always wanted to know how that worked. You know, when they had the plagues on Egypt when Israel was leaving, and it says that all of Egypt went dark except where the Jews were. I'm like, what? It's like black, and then you step out like from behind a curtain, and it's light. I'm like, how did that work? You know, but that had to be kind of how it worked. Because one part of the land had light, and one part was dark, where the light was absorbed. And God can do that. We have materials now that will absorb light. I just saw a video, I think it was Friday, where they showed this room coated with this substance. I can't remember what it is. And you walk in with a flashlight, you know, if the light's off, turn it on, it's like you never turned it on. It's totally black because it absorbs all the energy. And I'm like, wow. Anyway, okay.
Would you quote the reference for that, what you talked about?
Which one?
Christian. You said a Christian would not be affected.
I can't give you the verse. It's down in like towards the end of Revelation. Look where the bowl judgments are.
Towards the end of Revelation, you mean chapter 22?
No, not 20, but towards like where the bowl judgments are. They're down in like, I don't know, 10, 12, 14, somewhere in there. And at least, that's what I remember. I haven't read it in a little while. I could be wrong, but there are some judgments that happen to everybody and some that don't happen to the Christians.
So since this is during the tribulation, you're talking about people that became Christians.
After it started, yes. We who believe in the rapture believe that all the Christians are taken out of the earth prior to the tribulation. But yet, billions of people get saved during the tribulation. But yet, it's very different. There's no church and things like that. Anyway, let's see. Revelation 7:1 says this: After this I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on earth or sea or against any tree. Now that's the seal judgments. Those are the very first ones. Which means, and it never says the winds start up again, which means there's basically no wind this entire time during the tribulation. Which it has, and I talk about this more when we actually get to chapter 7. But just think about the fact that most weather is created by wind. No wind? No weather. Which means some parts of the earth it'll rain all the time, and some parts of the earth it won't rain at all. Because how do we get rain here? What has to happen? The wind brings the storm. Yep. No wind?
The topography affects that.
Absolutely.
The topography is flat. It's different.
Yep. Absolutely. So, yeah. Yeah, when you look at what the earth was like pre-flood, and I think what Jesus is going to do during Revelation, yeah, the weather was very different because we didn't have mountains. And mountains have a huge impact on weather. Just like here, it rains like crazy in Prescott. Now, what do we get? You know, as they used to say, we're the redheaded stepchild. You know, we get nothing. There's a friend of mine who lives in the Williamson Valley. He'll go, man, we got 3 inches. I'm like, we got a sprinkle. You know, that's it. Because the mountain stops.
We get their leftovers.
Yeah. All right. So, this is another interesting thing that's going to happen. So, there'll be no wind, no electricity from wind generators at all. So, then also we're going to see that all light coming from space And I don't know that we know exactly how this is going to work. So the fourth trumpet judgment, the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. I'm not really sure if that's telling us that it's going to dim by a third, or if there's actually going to be a third more darkness each day than there is now, type of thing. The point being is, however it works out, you got less solar energy to go on your solar panels, which are already horribly inefficient, so you're going to get even less out of it.
That's going to be weird, though. I mean, what would happen geologically, or
With what?
if a third of the sun was.
Right. The question is, what would happen geologically? Well, it's actually the whole Earth. Everything on the Earth, the entire ecosystem will be messed up because it is that sun heating the waters of the ocean, causing evaporation, which causes oxygen and plants to grow, and on and on. The plants aren't going to grow like they did because they only get a third of the solar energy, and on it goes. It's going to affect everything.
Because everything's, I forget that word, but everything's working in harmony.
Right. And the sun gives life to everything. Without the sun, there's no life. And now it's going to be by a third, it's going to be reduced. And then another one is at the fifth bowl judgment. See how we hit all the judgments? We started with the seal. That's where the sun's not going to blow. The wind's not going to blow. Then we're going to go to the trumpet, which is the next seven. And that's what we just looked at, where a third of the light, a third of the sun disappears. Now we're down at the bowl judgments, which are the last seven, and this is the fifth one. So this doesn't last terribly long, so it comes down towards the end. And what it says there is, the fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in anguish and cursed the God of heaven for their pain and sores. They did not repent of their deeds. All right? So that's why I thought what that person wrote me and said was very interesting, is because of the fact that I'd never thought about solar and wind being involved in this, and yet it makes a lot of sense, and it helps you understand maybe more of why God does what he does. Like with stopping the wind, it's not just about electricity. That's going to wreak havoc on the earth, but that is part of it. And the same with the sun reducing, It's interesting to try to sit down and figure out how this works, what's going to happen. That the sun is going to reduce its output. Is something going to block it during, part of the day, like the moon or the solar eclipse? Is some other body going to move in? Or is it more the case that it's going to act like it's running out of fuel and reduce its output by a third? It sounds like it's going to be something that blocks it, because the way it reads, a third of the day will be darker and a third of the night will be dark. That makes it sound like you have extra darkness.
Are babies going to be born during
Yes.
tribulation?
Everything on Earth will function as it usually does, just not very well.
Even another option there is that there could be dust accumulation in the atmosphere that blocks those.
That too, absolutely, yes. Like if a meteor hits, or we have it happen now if a large volcano explodes.
Yes.
And you remember when Mount St. Helens went? Do you remember what happened in Yellowstone National Park?
Yep.
Ice in the middle of the summer, if I recall right. Yet it got so cold because of that cloud blocking the sun, that they got ice in Yellowstone. In fact, I remember about someone that went in their camper, and it rained, and then it froze, and they couldn't get out. Because it rained all in the door, and it was all frozen solid, which shouldn't happen in the summer. But yeah, that's enormous impact on everything. So
while all this is going on, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Really digest it. Are we going to be taking those who God wants?
we believe that the Christians will be raptured out prior to the tribulation.
Okay.
Not everybody believes that. The question was, what's going to happen to the Christians? Some people believe we'll have to go through it. The Bible does not clearly state one way or the other. Okay? I believe the preponderance of the evidence in the Bible says we will be raptured. But like I said, there's no verse that says you will be gone.
Right.
It's one of those things where I believe we'll be raptured. The tribulation starts and I'm still here. I'll be going, well, I was wrong about that one. That kind of thing. So, or we could be like my dad. We could be the people who believe that you're going to go through the tribulation, the post-tribulationists, only we're praying for proof. Then we cover our bases. Or I'm in the camp of called pan-tribulationism. It'll all pan out. exactly the way God wants it to.
Whether we like it or not.
And whether we can figure it out or not doesn't
Yeah.
really make any difference. And the point is not to figure it out, the point is to recognize it when it happens. If we're here, and for others on the earth. That's a big part of what will bring millions and even billions into the kingdom, is that the things happening are in the book of Revelation, and it's absolutely clear. And there'll be a lot of people left on earth that will know this. Here's the saddest part. If the rapture occurs, there'll be an awful lot of churches on this planet that'll still be filled on Sunday morning. And that's the saddest part of all. Meaning there were never truly saved people. And that's really, and yet that probably will happen. Okay, turn to Psalm 83. I hope you're already there. We're going to pick back up what we got into this last week, talking about what's going to happen with Islam. Before the Antichrist takes world power, something has to be done about Islam. There's no way they'd let that happen, unless it was a Muslim imam who was the one taking world power. But it's not, because the Bible says in the tribulation, there'll be the first 3.5 years, there'll be a one world religion that accepts every belief, except as we talked about last week, the three monotheistic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, which all come from the same book, the Old Testament. And those three will not. Of those three, who are the militant ones that kill people? Islam, absolutely. So they've got to be dealt with. And what we find is in Psalm 83 is a prophecy, and Ezekiel 38 is a prophecy that literally tells us God's going to wipe them from the face of the earth. In Psalm 83, it's a war where the Israelite military annihilates their enemies. In Ezekiel 38, that's going to be Israel caught totally off guard. And this enormous coalition attacks them, and God absolutely annihilates them without Israel lifting a finger.
Islam is not ready to stop or turn around.
No, and that's what's going to happen. They're going to get wiped out.
Momentum, absolutely, yeah.
So, Psalm 83. So what we need to do is we've got to understand these two separate wars that are coming, we need to understand what's different about them. And the big thing is, besides the players in it, the actors in it, it's what are their goals? What is motivating them? And they have two totally different motivations. One of the motivations is happening right now, right in our faces, in America as well as in Israel and the Middle East.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see what is their motivation. We looked at Psalm 83 last week, and we saw clearly that their motivation was this. This is taken right out of the scripture, out of Psalms. Come, let us wipe them out as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more. And we heard this recently.
Yes.
You hear it all the time, but this is how it's said now. From the river to the sea. We've got all kinds of students from Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, out protesting in favor of Hamas, the terrorists, known terrorists, no question about it, chanting this, from the river to the sea. That is in the manifestos and the documents of Hezbollah, Hamas, the PLO, and in it they very clearly say this means we want to annihilate Israel, we want to exterminate the Jews as though they never existed, and there'll be a single state called Palestine in the story. Yeah, Ken?
I just watched it, and there were some of them that asked that question, what it meant, they looked at it like, I don't know.
Exactly the same thing I saw. Ken said that they went and questioned him and said, what does that mean? And they're just blank. And I even heard one guy, he goes, well, I don't know, they just handed me this sign when I walked up.
Yeah.
And that's what I see so much of people protesting things. They have no idea. None. And are willing to even say they have no idea.
They're being paid.
I think they just want something that gives them some kind of meaning. I really do. And this is it. And a lot are getting paid as well. Yeah.
Well, a lot of this is George Soros is paying billions of
Oh.
dollars to these people to do this.
Absolutely. Just like he's elected all manner of district attorneys.
Be dumb as a rock.
See, Soros is smart. He's like, we don't take it over through the political system. We take it over through the legal system. And that's why he backed all of these DAs that are now in office who won't enforce the laws, who won't arrest the criminals, who want to have no money bail, meaning you just get right out and you don't have to do anything. All that, I mean, they literally have said they want to empty the prisons. You're like, well, that's great if you send them to Cuba or Russia or somewhere. That's what they did to us. Don't keep them here, you know.
They've also, they've not
they polarized the judiciary, period,
Oh,
and even our judges. If you listen to the comments from the judges when they're
Yeah.
releasing these people, where they're standing, so it's gone. We really don't have a law.
no.
And you're attacking, well, everybody knows what they're doing to Donald Trump. Not that I'm for or against the man. It's what the judiciary
Yep.
has been polarized and nationalized.
As they keep saying, it's been weaponized. And that's what's happening. They're using it as a weapon to try to interfere in the election, actually. But the thing is, as we looked last week, we saw where it said in the last days of Matthew, it said lawlessness will increase. Hello? I mean, like in ways we couldn't imagine that our judges are now ignoring the law. I mean, you know, again, if not for or against Donald Trump, but, you know, the judge that he's going before in New York said he was guilty before there was any trial. There was no trial. No, you're guilty. You pay this money. End of story. He's like, huh? And nobody was defeated. That's the American way is you're innocent until proven guilty. And yet this judge just said, you're guilty. You did it. Pay $500 million. And then go on with the rest of the trial. That was the civil trial. Now the criminal trial. And you're like, huh? And every law expert says this should be thrown out the second because there's absolutely no standing. The statute of limitations is gone. I mean, there's no question. Yet, the problem is it's in New York. You know? That's why I'm so surprised they can't get a change of venue. You'd think that wouldn't be that hard, saying there's no way you can get a fair trial here. No way. Yeah. But yeah, they won't let them. So, all right, let's go on. So we know that from the river to the sea, that means that they want to annihilate Israel. And we also know that most of the people out there protesting, the one guy I heard, he said, well, you know, I think it means, first he said, I have no idea. And then the reporter, the person asking the question said, well, they say it says we want to exterminate Israel. And then his response, I don't really think it means that. I think it means they just want a two-state solution. He's like, but that's not what Hamas says. You know, and they've gotten up in public, the leaders of Hamas, Hezbollah, what's his face that was head of the PLO, Arafat, they said in public and recorded things, we want to exterminate Israel from the river to the sea, from the Jordan to the Mediterranean. Very clear. And yet we see it happening all around us, which is exactly what Psalm 83 says, where God said that's what they'll say, and they're saying exactly what God said they'd say. You know, so it's kind of easy to identify. So their ultimate goal is annihilation of Israel. Then it identifies their enemies. Who are these people? Interesting. Edom is who it says. If you look at Psalm 83, 6 to 8. The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Gebel and Ammon and Amalek, Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also has joined them. They are the strong arm of the children of Lot. So it tells us who these people are. So these are the ancient names. So we translate that to modern names. Edom, that's in the state of Jordan, in the country of Jordan. They are the descendants of Esau. Ammon, that's part of Jordan as well, the descendants of Lot. Remember, Ammon and Moab were the descendants of Lot through incest with his daughters, who got him so drunk he didn't know what was going on, had sex with him so they could have kids. And Ammon and Moab hated Israel from the beginning. They have been their enemy ever since they became countries. They've always worked with the enemies of Israel and attacked them constantly during the time of the judges. Then there's Moab. That's also Jordan, descendants of Lot. The Hagrites, that's Syria up north. Asher, that's Syria. Then we've got Tyre. That's on the coast of Lebanon. Gebel, that's in Lebanon. Amalek, that's Egypt. Philistia, Gaza Strip, where the Philistines were. Interesting. Who are they fighting right now? Hamas. Where? Gaza Strip. Ishmaelites, those are the Arabs, Saudi Arabia, the Bedouins, the descendants of Ishmael, the ones who created Islam and decided that it would be extremely anti-Semitic because of the fact that they believed that Isaac stole the birthright from Ishmael, because Ishmael actually was the firstborn through his mother, Hagar. So here's what a map looks like. And what you will notice is that They're all of Israel's border enemies. Not the far-reaching countries, but the border enemies. And I think this is one of the very important points of this. Because what you'll see as we go through this. Okay, they're all border. They're also extremely anti-Semitic. And they're predominantly Muslims. I'm not Muslims, Arabs. The Jordanians are not necessarily, but most of Egypt actually has Arab history. Most of Lebanon, big chunks of Syria, because you got to remember that Arabs controlled that part of the world under their empire that lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the Arabs have basically infiltrated and replaced lots of the country's normal people in the Middle East. Like the people in Egypt, they probably have some Egyptian genetics, but they have a lot more of Arab. Also, think of the Egyptians you've seen on TV. What color is their skin?
White.
No, not the ones on TV.
Okay.
They're mostly brown and darker. But when you look at the paintings from ancient Egypt,
That's what I was thinking.
they're very light-skinned, which is interesting. So, and they're very different genetic people. Then, what is the Psalm 83? Now, I'm not going through the passages because we read it last week and we talked about some of this. It says, "Do to them as you did to Midian" in verse 9 of Psalm 83. That's all. Do to them as you did to Midian. So then we need to go look in the Bible and find out, well, what did Israel do to Midian? Okay. And I don't know why this is up there. I got this out of sequence. I have no idea how this happens. I go through this in the morning before I come here. And it seemed like it was okay to me. I think it's Satan. So, what happened in Midian was the Midianite women enticed the Israelite men to come and worship their false gods. And they did this by they have sex as part of their worship service. Remember Balak and Balaam? We talked about them before. Balaam was this weird prophet that God actually gave prophecies to, but who also seemed to be connected to other gods as well. And he refused. He couldn't. Balak hired him to curse the Israelites when Moses was leading them into the land of Israel. That's how far back this is. And it didn't work, no matter what they did. But then Balaam said, here's what you do. You get your best looking women, and you take them to this temple that's near where they're camped, and have the women go entice the men to come and worship that false god, and they'll do it. And they did. And because of that, Moses' army went in and killed every male in the Midian military. Every single one of them. They also then, God brought a plague that killed 24,000 people in Israel. The ones that participated. Not everybody did. Remember, there was probably 3 million Israelites. So, not everybody. The Lord even, they went in and they even killed the women. The women who were not virgins. Because they were the ones that led the Israelites into this issue. They kept the virgin girls, but the rest killed everybody. That's what God said, do to these border countries. Kill everybody, basically. Okay? Not like in this, it wasn't the virgin girls and stuff, but it was everybody, all the adults. Then it says in verse 10 of Psalm 83, as to Sisera and Jabin at the river Kishon, who were destroyed at Endor, who became dung from the ground. So he says, do to them as you did to Midian. Then he says, do to them as you did to Sisera and Jabin. This is interesting because this is farther down. I keep doing this one. It should be over here. This is farther down in their history, where this was where, remember Deborah and Barak? I don't know if you know that story. Time of the judges. Deborah was a female judge in Israel, which in its own is a very big deal if you understand the time. This is why I say you got to know the history or you miss so much. What kind of society or culture was the Jewish kingdom? Patriarchal or matriarchal? Patriarchal. Extremely patriarchal. Now you're reading in the Bible and all of a sudden one of the judges of Israel is a woman. And you got to ask yourself, what's going on here? There are no other female leaders, virtually. Esther and this woman, and that's it. Kind of thing. What it means is Israel was so bad there was not a single man in the entire country that was right with God. So then God had to go to the next tier and use a woman. And he used her as the judge and the prophetess. And the Midianites, the Moabites, I think it was. Right. And they end up going against this military of King Jabin, a king of Hazor. That's right, these guys are not Moabites or Midianites. It's the king of Hazor, just a country in Canaan. And his general is Sisera. They had a huge army with 900 iron chariots. In that day and age, that many chariots was enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, a country might have 10, 15, 20. They had 900. And they're iron. They're not brass or bronze or any of that. They're iron. That's the most formidable weapon they had. That was the tank of their day, was the chariot. And Israel had no chariots, no horses. God said you were not to use horses and you were not to use chariots. The reason being, when they fought battles, it had to be extremely obvious they won because God's on their side and no other reason. So they go out and they fight these guys. Barak, who won't go by himself, only goes if Deborah goes with him. And so in the story, she tells him, fine, then you're going to get none of the credit. Because you won't, basically, she's saying, you won't man up and go do what God said to do. I have to go hold your hand. Yeah. And so they go.
Hebrews 11, he's the man of faith.
What's that?
In Hebrews 11, he gets mentioned as the man of faith.
Who?
Barak.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, he went and attacked, but he wouldn't go on his own. He made Deborah go with him. So, and what happens is, he takes an army of 10,000. I mean, they had far more than that, but God just said, take 10,000. And he went and attacked their 900 chariots, and guess what? They killed every single man in that army. And it was a coalition of some multiple peoples, and they wiped them out at Endor. Then the final one is one we're pretty familiar with. It's talking about Oreb and Zeb. In verse 11 of Psalm 83, it says, make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, all their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna, who said, let us take possession for ourselves of the pastures of God. Notice the same motivation? The same motivation. Kill the Jews, take their land. It's exactly what they're saying today. It's another connection between this war, past, and the future. And so what happens is, if you remember, Gideon forms an army, and first he's going up against an army of 135,000 Midianites. He puts together an army of 32,000. He's still outnumbered almost 5 to 1. Okay, 4 to 1. God says that is just too many. Anybody that's scared and afraid, go home. So he tells them that. Well, guess what? 22,000 leave, and they have 10,000.
Oh, wow.
God says, that's way too many to fight 135,000. So here's what you do. You go get a drink at the river. The guys that scoop it with their hands and watch around them and drink, you keep. The ones that don't, at least I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so what's he left with? 300. So he goes against an army of 135,000 to 300. He attacks them, they annihilate them. Basically, they annihilate themselves. God does this multiple times. The army is started in the middle of the night. It's dark. You can't see. You kill everybody near you, and the only people near you are actually your own people. And so they basically kill themselves.
So is that an analogy of, like, say, hypothetically, you've got, well, we are. It's happening now. Everything's falling apart and getting weird, right? But I mean, as it gets worse, sometimes we feel powerless over this thing.
Yes.
So is that analogous, whatever, where God will give us the strength to deal with whatever's going on?
Well, I mean, that's why God did it this way, to prove that he's on Israel's side, and because of him, they defeated him.
Right, but I mean,
And yes, he still does that for individuals. He does the same thing for us. Yeah. So, okay. So here's what happens is they attack them, and that 300 people, along with them killing themselves, wipes them out. They kill over 120,000 in the original battle. Then they run. Sisera and Jabin, they run, because, I mean, they're getting wiped out. So the Israelites start chasing them, and they catch up to them, and they continue to slaughter them until everybody's dead.
how long is that battle?
Not long, a couple of days at most. Yeah. And so, and it says to make their nobles like Oreb and Zebah and Zalmunna, where they were all killed and destroyed. Now, here's why I had the thing about the, I've got to go back and find my other, because I pushed the wrong button. All right, in Psalm 83:13, it tells us what God wants them to do. And here's what it says. Oh my God, make them like whirling dust, like chaff before the wind, As fire consumes the forest, as the flame sets the mountains ablaze, so may you pursue them with your tempest and terrify them with your hurricane. So, any idea what that sounds like when speaking about a modern weapon?
Start a brush fire.
What's that?
Start a brush fire.
Well, a really big one. It sounds very,
Destruction.
Yes, that's what
it
it
sounds
says.
very much like a nuclear blast.
Yes.
A hurricane, a fire,
Mhm.
a fire big enough it burns an entire mountain could very possibly be a nuclear attack. And in that area, who has the most nuclear weapons?
Us in Russia.
No, in that Middle East.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Israel. We also know that if Israel has to fire a nuke, what are they going to do? They're going to hit everybody. Because they can't take the chance
Right.
that they get hit with a nuke and then they can't respond. So even if they're mad at Iran, they're going to hit Saudi, Egypt, everybody. Because that they have to. And so now, could be a nuclear attack. Because here's the words, I pulled them out. Whirling dust, wind, consuming fire, set the mountains ablaze, hurricane. That is how you would describe a nuclear blast if you'd never heard or seen such a thing. You know, he's never seen a bomb, gunpowder, none of that. You know, and so this is how, well, all you can know is fire. And if you go look at a nuclear blast, what's its primary destructive force? Fire. It sends out a fire ring that goes for miles and miles and burns everything in sight. In fact, it's so hot, if you've ever seen them, it burns people's shadows onto walls. You can literally see their shadows on the walls. There weren't people there. There were mannequins. Well, there weren't in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. It actually burns them on the walls. That type of thing. Or it can also be something like, we have something called the fuel air bomb. It's our biggest bomb. What it really is a giant tank full of explosive liquid. It's dropped from the air and exploded above the surface of the ground, and it sends out a fireball that covers enormous amounts of area. It's possible Israel might have something like that that's even more powerful. Because see, the thing is, you really don't want to nuke your border neighbors. Because when the wind blows, what's going to happen? You're going to radiate yourself. So I'm like, I have a hard time believing it'd be some kind of nuke. But it might be something else that's a conventional weapon that has enormous destructive capability. And also, those kind of weapons, who do they kill? Everybody. They're indiscriminate. And remember the Bible in Psalm 83, it said, do to them what you did to Midian, do to them what you did to Orb and Zeke, and what did they do to them? They killed everybody. In not every case, but in many of the cases they killed everybody. At the very least, they kill all the fighting age males, which is the same as you take over the countries. So, interesting. Looking at my stuff, thinking I had this in a different order.
So I have a question. How do we know that, where in the Bible does it say, does it kind of like actually focus on like, well, if Russia, America, and everybody starts dropping atomic bombs, most of us are going to die.
The Bible doesn't, the question is, does the Bible say anything about dropping nuclear bombs all over? It does not. But it describes battles in certain places that sound an awful lot like that. But again, in that day, those people didn't have the language to describe what they saw. You'll see that a lot with John in Revelation. He sees things that he has no words to describe, so he grabs the closest thing he can think of to describe what it is. As I said before, if you can't understand something, you don't have some reference to it. We humans are just that way. You know, we have a hard time just, like, it's hard, like I've said before, take a blind person that suddenly gets their sight back and try to explain trees to them. They don't look remotely the same that they're all trees and stuff like that. You know? So anyway, that's what we think is going to be happening. It also then says in verse 16, it says, fill their faces with shame. I think there's very important clues here too. That they may seek your name, O Lord. Let them be put to shame. Notice how it talks about being put to shame twice. And if you think about how the radical Islamic Muslims are, they're extremely arrogant. Their God, Allah, is the only God. The God of the Jews does not exist. The Jews are thieves and they stole the birthright. And yet, what he's saying is they're going to be put to shame. Their enormous beliefs are going to be destroyed. Well, that's going to happen when they launch this enormous strike against Israel, and Israel wipes them off the face of the earth. the people outside of this area that are still Muslim are going to say that was a war between Allah and God, and it looks like God won. That's going to have a huge impact across the world. We've only got a few minutes, and we'll cover this more next week. But something I thought about new this time, and why I don't ever reuse my notes, and it makes me go back and redo it every time, is the fact that think of the wealth Israel would have if they controlled these countries. Saudi Arabia produces more oil than anybody in the world except one country, I won't tell you until next week. Israel would have their oil. They have. They would also gain enormous amounts of fresh water. They would control the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Nile, and the Jordan. They are the best farmers in the world. Imagine if they got all this farmland and all this fresh water, what would happen to Israel? Fabulously wealthy. Able to develop any kind of weapons they want with no help from America or anybody else. You kind of start seeing God's plan here, don't you? What's America doing to Israel? We're pulling away. We started with Barack Obama. Trump pulled us back. Now we're pulling away again. Okay? Trump might get elected. We might get pulled back. But the overall trend is we're going to abandon Israel. So something has to happen that Israel still has the ability to defend themselves. This could be a big part of it. Now, this is all speculation. None of this is concrete, nothing. I'm just telling you what fits the best to what the Bible says and what we see happen. It may happen, may not. I'm just saying, look at the possibilities here. They would also now have a buffer between them and all of their enemies if they control these lands. Also remember that the Bible says in the last days, God will make Israel bloom like the desert bloom with water. And well, if they had all this, had control over it all, that kind of stuff would happen. So, interesting. We'll see what happens, but we're out of time. So apparently there's going to be a part 3.
And it's not a matter of if they'll get the land. They were given the land. They will get it back.
Oh.
All the way from the Euphrates to the sea.
Yep. Now, most people don't realize that it goes all the way to the Euphrates. It's only under Solomon that they ever really have that much. They never actually controlled all of Israel because they never would do what God wanted. Like the Philistines in the Gaza Strip. They've never really had control over that area. Still don't to this day. They did for a while and then they gave it back. But absolutely. Yeah, the Bible's very clear. That's one thing that we can really stand on is it says that when they get their land back, it will never be taken again. And they got it in 48. So Hamas isn't winning. Hezbollah is not winning. None of those are winning. And all those Americans that are protesting it, I would not want to be in their shoes. Do you remember when we were in Genesis and I showed you what it says about Abraham? Those who bless you will be blessed. Those who curse you will be cursed. Now we can look down through the history of every nation. Every nation that's ever blessed Israel, Canada and the United States, have become the most powerful and wealthiest nations in the world. Canada's not the most powerful, but they're very wealthy. And then when we look at all the nations that aggressed against Israel, they either don't exist or they've been greatly reduced. Look at Germany. Tried to exterminate the Jews. Who got exterminated? Nazis. And Germany is still now today, it's a small country with very little power. Yeah.
What I find out is all there, like Israel has all these kind of enemies around it, right? All that adversity. But in the same sense, it's like, I mean, in the same topic, they have become very, very strong because of it.
Oh, absolutely. Israel's extremely strong. We have to keep remembering, Israel is the size of a county in Arizona.
Right.
And yet, they can take on enormous militaries and absolutely wipe them out. When they first formed the nation, they got attacked by all these people almost.
Mm-hmm.
And they wiped them out and pushed them out and actually gained territory. Unfortunately, they gave it back. But nonetheless, they were done. And then the 6-Day War, same thing. 6 days, they totally destroyed their enemies. You know, that type of thing. So we got to go.